Well, hey, this is Royce with Jiu Jitsu Comics, and today I'm going to be inking a panel of my comic LOL roll. This is going to be featuring a gorilla. Now, sometimes with comics, I just start sketching out a page and do it that way, but this time I was drawing a gorilla, and I don't really know how to draw gorillas without looking at one. So here's a picture that I found on Google, and I just searched gorilla sitting down eating because that's kind of what I wanted the gorilla doing. So after finding this picture, I spent a little bit of time just roughing out what that gorilla looks like. A very rough sketch. You can see here I'm really just blocking out some of the main elements here. Some detail on the fingers, just things that I think I'm gonna need additional help with when I do the actual sketch. For me, faces are always super important. So understanding the relationship of where the nose is in relation to the eyes, in relation to the mouth, in relation to the ears is going to be super important here. So I already did my sketch. You can see it right there. And it's not a true-to-life gorilla. It's a cartoon gorilla. But that's the one that I went with there. So I have the sketch down. I turned down the opacity so that it's easier for me to draw on top of it. What this is akin to, this is like if you've ever used tracing paper or just regular sheets of paper that are thin, where you draw something and then you put the paper on top of the other sheet of paper and you can see through it a little bit. So that's what this process is doing in Photoshop. It's sort of like that same thing where you have tracing paper. So I started putting these like wrinkles on the nose, but something about it didn't quite feel right. So I was like, I'm not sure if that's how gorillas' noses actually are. So let me zoom in on my reference photo, and I can see that in fact I was correct. Gorillas do not have that kind of I don't know what you want to call it, but that rougher skin there on the nose. I'm sure the nose is kind of rough on the gorilla, but it's not like that. So that's more of like what I would say, if you ever seen like old people's hands, and the old people's hands are like kind of like extra wrinkly and rough. That's kind of what I'm trying to mimic there. But the gorilla's nose is not like that, so I decided to erase it. What you see here is a very thick black line for that top part of the eye, and that's to indicate the depth of the eyebrows. So you can see that the eyes are in a little bit more. I don't know the scientific reason why gorillas are like this, but that's just kind of how gorillas are, and some humans too. And if you ever seen a picture of me, my eyes are kind of like that too. So in this comic panel, the gorilla is just eating, and I figure, well, I should give him a banana, because that's what comically what we associate gorillas with. We associate them with bananas. I'm kind of just inking as I go, but some of the principles I try to apply to my drawings. I'm not always successful with it, and I get lazy because I just want to get stuff done sometimes. But some of the principles that I apply are weight. Real quick, let me make a note here. So you see when I'm sketching out, I sketched out this hand very roughly. I find that it's easier for me to start with the rough shape of the hand. Basically what the silhouette's kind of going to look like, what that block of space should look like, and then I fit in details as I'm doing the actual inking itself. It's just easier for me that way. So what I was talking about is this weight of the line. The weight is to indicate kind of where shadows are. So you can see like his fingers are a thinner line in between his fingers, and then at the very bottom of his hand it's a little bit thicker of a line. So what I'm indicating here on this drawing is I'm just drawing this picture of this guy with very exaggerated shadows, so that you can understand the principle that I'm applying here as far as having different weights. So this guy has a thicker line at the bottom of his nose and a thinner line going up that ridge of his nose, same as I did with the chin and on his neck area. So a lot of what I try to do while I'm drawing is indicate that depth and weight to so you can see here the heavier hair, that those tufts of hair at the bottom of his face are to indicate that it's a heavier, that there's a shadow there, and just that it's a thicker, heavier part of the guy. Now I'll say this too, a lot of times you'll use a thicker line just to outline areas, so that way it's easier to read, easier to see what the different elements of an image are. In this case, a gorilla. I want to make sure that the gorilla's head does not disappear into the gorilla's body, so that's why I put a thicker line generally all around his head, so that way you know, okay, this part is his head, this part is his body. The other thing about it is that I'm thinking into the future, because I know I'm going to add color, but I'm going to add color the lazy way, and I'm just going to make it a single solid color. And I know this gorilla is going to be a darker color, so in order to help distinguish the head from the rest of the body and still utilize a single solid color, I went ahead and just made it a thicker line. So you can see like his bicep, his arm, all getting thicker lines. Same here. Watch this. Swoop, swoop. The cool thing about Photoshop is when you draw the line wrong, you just Control Z it away and all your problems are gone. In real life, you can't really do that. You just gotta deal with the fact that you drew something terribly. But thankfully, Photoshop makes everybody a better artist because of you can just Control Z all your problems away. So the cool thing too is the hairs. You can see I'm just using short, thin lines, and I'm trying to get them to mimic fur, hair in a way that hair and fur kind of actually work. Sometimes they go away from each other, but a lot of times they'll follow the same curves of the body. You know, the more wild and unkempt an animal is, the more wild and loose that hair is going to be. But in this case, I just wanted to indicate that the gorilla has fur and its body is covered in hair. Again, I'm doing a hand here. A lot of the details are coming out as I draw it, not so much when I'm actually sketching it, because the hardest part with hands is, I think, is just the blocking of them. You know, just blocking them out so I know where they should go in relation to everything else, which can be tricky. So gorilla's got a nipple. He's got two. Boom, boom. I put a little bit of shadow here. You see here, this black line is just again indicating that different depth, that different shadow. Now the sketch itself, when you start drawing, and if a lot of artists too, not just if they just started drawing, they'll use a lot more shapes when starting out because they really want to build out their character. Now, the way that I like to do cartoons is a lazier way, and so my lazy way of doing cartoons is just drawing a lot of different cartoons and then understanding relationships between shapes. And so that way when I do my initial sketch, I have to do less work. I zoom out so we can make sure that this gorilla is easy to read, and I think he is easy to read. Now let's do the feet. You see the feet here, just kind of loosely drawn, and in some ways these are fine. These kind of comics, these kind of like wild lines are fine, but I just decided to expand them a little bit more, just to make him really stand out. So he's got his toenails, he's got his wrinkles that are on his hands, and they're looking pretty good. There's some bananas on the ground. Now, bananas are pretty easy to draw when they're drawn one direction. They're very hard for me to draw when they're, laying on the ground or they're at a different angle, because they quickly become chili peppers or boomerangs or all sorts of other shapes, and they don't look like bananas as much. So this is a little tricky for me. We're going to add shadows here. So for this comic, the style of shadows that I do is I just do these scratchy ones just to indicate that there's this shadow here. And that's really just to reinforce this scratchy style that I like in these comics. It makes it look more like it's a drawn piece and not like it's a digital piece. Then there's, just something I like about that look. And I'm going to be the one doing the comic, so I better like what it looks like. So this bunch of bananas, you can see from the sketch below, very rough sketch that I just go in and I do details. For me, drawing is very much a feeling, and his foot is being hidden. So that's why for me, the sketch itself should just capture a rough idea of the elements of the character, the picture, whatever. And everything else I do on the final drawing is based on feeling. I'll draw it, I'll say, this doesn't feel right, so I Control Z, and then I just keep adding lines until it feels right. And we are about reaching the end there. So the gorilla now is completely inked. I might go back in and add some additional lines for weight here or there. The last thing here that I'm going to ink on this page is going to be the word bubble. Now there's plenty of ways to do really nice and clean word bubbles, but again, in the spirit of this scratchy drawing style, I'm doing the scratchy drawing style. So we'll turn off that sketch layer, and we can see the gorilla in all of his glory, inked in black and white. Truth be told, I actually prefer black and white drawings. I love black and white drawings. However, I know that color just gets people's attention more. So in this case, I'm going to be coloring the gorilla next. I shot a whole video for that, and I'll be recording and uploading that as well. So you can see here I had like a little shadow where his arm is resting, just to make it read and separate from his leg. And that's going to be it. There you have it. The gorilla is inked, and ooh, ee, ee, ah, ah. I'll see you next time.